The laughter hit harder than any slap. My daughter Maya held up the leather-bound photo album I'd spent weeks assembling and sneered, "What am I supposed to do with this relic? Put it in a museum?" Her friends cackled as if I were the punchline. I stood there, surrounded by clinking wine glasses and cold smiles, clutching a pie no one touched. But what none of them knew, what Maya had forgotten, was that album sat atop a down payment. My money, my memories, my choice. She didn't just mock the photos. She mocked every sacrifice stitched into them. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. If you asked anyone in my small town who Ellen Cartwright was, they'd probably say, the nice lady who used to teach third grade, or that widow, with the flower boxes on Maple Lane. And they'd be right. I've always been simple, predictable, and proud of it. I wore my hair the same way for 20 years and packed a turkey sandwich every workday for over a decade. My joys were small but sacred. Sunday crossword puzzles, hummingbird feeders, and family dinners, even if it was just the two of us. I was 29 when my husband James was killed by a drunk driver on his way home from a night shift at the plant. Maya was 5. I remember the day I told her, how she blinked, confused, holding her stuffed rabbit, and whispered, "But Daddy was going to tuck me in tonight." That was the last time she asked for a bedtime story. After that, it was just the two of us, surviving on what was left. Teaching kept a roof over our heads. I picked up tutoring gigs in the evenings and cleaned office buildings on Saturdays to make ends meet. I never dated again. People said I should, but I couldn't imagine loving anyone the way I loved James. He had this way of listening, really listening, like even my quietest thoughts mattered. After he died, I poured all that love into Maya. Every birthday party, I handmade decorations. Every tooth she lost went into a tiny velvet pouch I still have tucked in my drawer. I documented everything. First steps, first day of school, scraped knees, missing front teeth, each moment captured in thick, glossy photos, carefully placed in chronological albums I kept stacked in the closet. It gave me purpose. It reminded me that we were still building something, even if it wasn't the life we'd planned. Maya was always bright, sharp-witted and ambitious. Even as a little girl, she had a confidence I never had. When she won the state science fair in 8th grade, she stood on the gymnasium stage like it was her birthright. I cried in the back row while other parents clapped politely. I was so proud of her. I still am. But as she got older, the gap between us widened. Not in a hostile way, more like a slow retreat. She stopped inviting me to events. Her clothes got sleeker, her tone cooler. When she left for college, she gave me a hug that felt more like a formality than affection. And when she landed her first job in Boston's competitive real estate market, I remember her saying, "It's probably best you don't visit right away. Things are chaotic." Still, I saved every email she sent me, every clipped article she was quoted in. I kept printing out her headshots, placing them in that last photo album, just in case she ever wanted to remember how far she'd come, how far we'd come. I never saw my thriftiness as a sacrifice. It was just what needed to be done. I drove the same beige Corolla for 18 years. My friends went on cruises. I planted tomatoes. I skipped new shoes so Maya could have dance lessons. I said no to weekend getaways so she could attend private SAT prep courses. I believed it was worth it, that she'd see it one day. And when she called me 3 months ago to tell me she and her fiancé Carter were looking at homes but falling short on the down payment, I didn't hesitate. I'd been saving James's life insurance money in a separate account. Over the years, I'd added to it slowly, dollar by dollar. It wasn't supposed to be touched unless something truly meaningful came along. This felt like that moment. Maya tried to brush it off at first. "You don't have to do that, Mom," she said. But I insisted. I told her it was a gift, from both me and her father. She softened then, just a little. Thanks. That'll definitely make things easier. I thought it would be the bridge back to us. The moment she would look at me, not as someone she'd outgrown, but as someone who'd built her. In the weeks before her housewarming, I worked on the photo album. Not just the pictures, letters too. I wrote to Maya at age 6, then 10, then 18, remembering moments she may have forgotten. The time she lost her voice before her school play and whispered her lines to me from the wings. The day she got her first period and sat on the bathroom floor crying because it meant she was growing up too fast. The little things no one else would ever know but me. It wasn't just a gift. It was our history. And when I watched her unwrap that album and laugh, like it was a joke, a burden, I didn't just lose my place in her life. I lost my place in her story. 3 months before the housewarming, Maya called me in the middle of the day, a rarity in itself. "Hey, Mom, you got a minute?" Her voice was tight, clipped, businesslike. I paused the kettle on the stove and held the phone to my ear. "Of course, sweetheart. Everything okay?" She sighed. "Yes and no. Carter and I found a place, a townhouse near Cambridge. 2-bedroom, hardwood floors, modern kitchen, pretty much perfect. But the seller bumped the asking price last minute, and we're short about 40 grand, 40,000. My breath caught, but I kept my tone steady. "That's a lot of money," I said carefully. "I know," she replied quickly. "And I wouldn't ask, not really. But Carter's folks can't help right now, and well," I remembered. "You had that money from Dad's policy. I mean, you're not using it, right? It wasn't malicious, just transactional, like she was ordering something off a menu she assumed I'd always be behind the counter for." The truth was, I had that. Money in a special account. It had sat untouched for nearly 3 decades. It was never meant for groceries or repairs. It was a quiet promise to myself that one day I'd use it for something beautiful, something meaningful, a legacy maybe. I thought about that as Maya talked. I remembered James's handwriting on the life insurance envelope, the way he wrote, "For Ellen and Maya, always." Still, I told her yes. "You'll really do that?" she asked, a hint of surprise in her voice. "Of course," I said. "Your father would have wanted you to have it." She didn't say thank you right away, just moved on to the logistics. Wire transfer details, banking hours, closing deadlines. As if we were colleagues managing an account, not a mother and daughter making history. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. I wasn't angry, just hollow. That night, I dug out my photo albums. Years of memories, carefully preserved, page after page of Maya growing up, smiling, sulking, studying, shining. I ran my fingers over a picture of her in high school, arms crossed, rolling, her eyes during a family photo. Even then, she'd started to drift, but she was still mine. And I wanted her to remember that. So I began crafting the gift. It wasn't just another album. This one was handmade, leather-bound, with gold embossing. For Maya, love, Mom. Each page included photos from the most meaningful milestones, her first steps, her 8th grade graduation, her moving into her first dorm. But more than that, I included letters. Short, heartfelt messages addressed to Maya at each stage of her life. To my little explorer, age 4. Today, you climbed the apple tree in Grandma's backyard. You fell, cried, then climbed again. You've always been braver than you think. To my teenager, age 16. I saw the college rejection in the trash before you told me. I wish you'd known then that failure doesn't make you small, it makes... You ready? Each letter ended with the same line. I'm proud of you. Always. Love, Mom. It took me 2 weeks to finish. Every evening I poured myself a cup of chamomile, turned on James's old jazz records, and worked by lamplight. That album became more than a gift. It became a piece of my soul. The things Maya never asked about. The memories only I carried. I wrapped it carefully in tissue paper and tied it with a lavender ribbon. I didn't include a card. I didn't need to. When the day of the housewarming arrived, I wore my best blouse and brought along a pecan pie I made from James's old recipe. I even got my hair done the day before, something I hadn't done since Maya's college graduation. Their new townhouse was modern, sleek, and sterile, floor-to-ceiling windows, black and white art on the walls. Carter met me at the door with a distracted hug. Maya fluttered around the kitchen, pouring wine and chatting about mortgage rates like she was on a panel. I placed the album on the gift table, among the wrapped blenders and champagne bottles. No one noticed it. During gift opening, Carter joked, his way through each box, while Maya laughed and leaned on him like a catalog model. Then she got to mine. "Oh, wow," she said, holding the album up. "It's a scrapbook," I gently corrected her. "It's a photo album, with letters, just something special." She flipped through a few pages and let out a laugh. "This is kind of intense, Mom. Did you really include pictures of me with chickenpox?" Laughter. Someone said, "This is like time travel." Another guest chimed in, "I didn't know people still printed photos." And then Maya said it. "What am I supposed to do with this relic? Put it in a museum?" The room burst into polite, wine-soaked chuckles. I smiled. I nodded. I even laughed softly to save face, but inside, I felt every stitch of that album tighten, around my throat like a noose. That album had rested on top of something far more sacred than wrapping paper. It had sat on top of a $48,000 sacrifice she hadn't earned, and clearly didn't understand. And in that moment, as I watched her toss it aside like clutter, I realized I hadn't just given Maya a gift. I'd handed her the last of my devotion, and she had laughed in its face. The laughter didn't stop quickly. It lingered, light and cruel, like a cold draft through an open window. And for a moment, I just stood there, holding my pie dish in both hands like a forgotten prop in a scene I didn't belong to. Maya didn't notice. She was already on to the next gift, a designer wine chiller from one of Carter's co-workers. "Oh my God, this is perfect for the kitchen counter," she squealed, hugging the woman across the table. The photo album was slid to the side like a placemat someone didn't need. I tried to find my seat again, but it had been taken. Someone younger, tanner, louder than me, had settled there with a glass of Cabernet and a story about their last trip to Napa. I stood awkwardly near the kitchen, the pie now beginning to sweat through the foil. The music picked up. Someone put on a playlist that thumped through the walls like a pulse. Carter walked by, nodded politely. "Hey, Mrs. Cartwright. Grab a drink. You good?" Mrs. Cartwright. Not Ellen, not Mom, just a label with polite distance. I nodded and found refuge in the kitchen. The counter was spotless, like no one had ever cooked in it. I placed the pie down next to an untouched charcuterie board and took a breath. That's when I heard them. Maya and Carter were in the hallway, just a few feet away, talking in low voices. They didn't know I was nearby. "It was sweet, but kind of intense, right?" Carter was saying. "The whole album thing? It's a little much." Maya gave a dry laugh. "She means well, but she's so outdated. Who even prints photos anymore?" "Yeah," he said. "It's like she's stuck in a Hallmark movie." Another laugh. I backed up slowly, careful not to bump into the granite island. My chest tightened. I felt like I was 16 again, standing, outside the gym, listening to classmates whisper that I was too quiet, too old-fashioned, too weird. Except this time, it wasn't classmates. It was my own daughter. I stayed in that kitchen for 20 more minutes, pretending to look at hors d'oeuvres no one was eating. Finally, I slipped out the side door. No one noticed I was gone. Outside, the sky was turning a soft lavender. I sat on the stone steps of the patio, alone, listening to the music and laughter trickle through the walls. I thought about the photo I'd glued onto the last page of the album. A picture of James holding baby Maya, both of them asleep on the couch, bathed in sunlight. Below it I had written, "This is how it all began. With love so quiet, you could miss it if you weren't paying attention." And now, here I was, unnoticed, unappreciated, and suddenly undeniably clear on something I hadn't wanted to admit. She didn't see me anymore. Not really. Later that night, after I drove home, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself, the way I imagined Maya had seen me at that party. A woman past her prime, sentimental, soft-spoken, maybe even embarrassing. I took off my earrings, one at a time, and set them in the dish James had given me on our 5th anniversary. I felt myself growing small in my own home, but somewhere inside, a fire flickered. Walked to the guest room and opened the top drawer of the small desk. Inside was the matching photo album, the one I had made for myself, a twin to Maya's, same cover, same pages, but this one I had filled with copies of the originals. I flipped through it like a soldier taking inventory. Here, Maya's first steps. Here, the toothless grin. Here, a shot of her looking up at me with complete, unfiltered love. Here, her high school diploma clutched in both hands. Here, my face beside hers, proud, tired, joyful. I sat on the edge of the bed, opened my laptop, and logged into my bank account. The $48,000 wire transfer was still pending, scheduled to clear first thing Monday morning. My hand hovered over the mouse, and then, with a calmness I didn't expect, I clicked cancel. A warning box popped up. "Are you sure you want to stop this transfer?" I clicked yes. No hesitation, no second guessing, just a breath, and then peace. The next morning, I called the bank and asked to put a fraud hold on the account until I could come in and sign documents. The young man on the phone was polite and efficient. "No problem, Mrs. Cartwright. We can freeze the funds temporarily. Just stop by Monday morning." That weekend, I slept better than I had in months. On Sunday evening, Maya called. I didn't answer. I watched the phone ring twice, then fade. No voicemail. That silence felt like a gift. She thought my love was limitless, that I'd keep giving no matter how she dismissed me. But when she laughed at my memories, she didn't know she'd also laughed away the keys to her future. I didn't cry that night. Not when I canceled the transfer. Not when I replayed Maya's words in my head like a cruel lullaby. But grief has its own schedule. It comes when it's quiet enough to be heard. Monday morning, I dressed in my Sunday best, navy cardigan, gray slacks, and the pearls James gave me the year before he died. I wanted to look composed, not for the bank teller, for myself, proof that I hadn't unraveled. The bank was quiet, just the rhythmic clicking of keyboards and the occasional murmur of customers signing away futures. I smiled politely at the young woman behind the desk and handed her my ID. "I'd like to formally revoke a wire transfer. I froze it over the weekend." She glanced at the monitor, nodded. "Yes, ma'am? Funds are still in the holding queue. Do you want to move them? Back to your savings?" "Yes," I said, "all of it, every cent." As she typed, I noticed her eyes pause briefly on the screen. Then she looked up. "This was a down payment," she said gently. "For a property?" "No," I replied. "It was almost a down payment for someone who didn't understand its value." She didn't ask more, just nodded and clicked a few keys. "You're all set, Mrs. Cartwright." Walking out of that bank felt like reclaiming something that had been slowly drained for years, an invisible reserve of self-worth I didn't even know I was running low on. But by the time I got home, the grief hit. Not anger, not regret, just sorrow. I made a cup of tea and sat in the living room with the twin album on my lap, the one I had made for myself, every page a mirror to the one Maya had laughed at. The letters I had written to her at every age began to feel like letters to a ghost. And that's when the memories came, not like a slideshow, but like waves. The first flashback was small. Maya at 6 years old, crying over a dead bird she'd found in the backyard. I remember kneeling beside her, explaining death in the gentlest way I could. Sometimes things go where we can't follow, baby, but we can love them from here. Then another, Maya, 13, slamming her bedroom door after we argued about a skirt that was too short. I had knocked softly, holding her favorite snack in one hand and a folded apology in the other. She never opened the door. Later, she said, "You're so dramatic. It was just a skirt." But it had never been about the skirt. It was about the crack in the wall I had painted over so many times, hoping she wouldn't notice how fragile I really was. And then I remembered the most vivid flashback of all, the day she graduated college. Everyone had someone. Dads in blazers, moms with flowers, siblings carrying balloons. I stood alone near the back of the auditorium, holding a bouquet of white lilies. When she finally came out, she looked surprised to see me. "Oh," she said. "You came all this way?" I smiled and handed her the flowers. Of course I did. She didn't introduce me to her friends, didn't ask me to join them for dinner. I rode the train back alone that night, watching the buildings blur into black fields and wondering if I had raised a stranger. I pressed my hand to the photo album. The silence in the room was thick, sacred even. This wasn't just about a party, it was about all the moments I excused, all the slights I forgave in the name of "she's just growing" or "she'll come around." Maybe she still would. But I had come to a new truth. I couldn't keep offering unconditional love to someone who treated it like a coupon with no expiration date. And maybe, just maybe, pulling the money back wasn't punishment. It was mercy. A mother's final gift to herself. I walked over to the kitchen drawer and pulled out an old notebook. It was where I kept lists, groceries, to-dos, passwords. But on the last page, I started something new. Things I've given Maya without her knowing. My last piece of pie when I told her I wasn't hungry. The new winter coat I returned so she could afford her school trip. My evenings when I should have been resting my husband's voice, remembered only in bedtime stories, a down payment I would have gladly given, if she'd only looked me in the eye. When I finished, I closed the notebook, took a breath, and stood a little taller. Have you ever given someone a gift straight from the heart, only to feel like it was tossed aside? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Sometimes sharing helps more than silence ever could. Later that evening, my phone rang. Maya. I let it ring. She called again the next morning. Then again that afternoon. I finally picked up on the third day, my voice calm. "Hi, Mom," she said, her tone clipped. "Did something happen with the transfer? Carter said it bounced." "It didn't bounce," I replied. "I canceled it." Silence. "You... what?" "I decided the money would be better spent somewhere it was appreciated." "Mom, that's not fair. You said that album belonged in a museum, so maybe I'm just curating the exhibit." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I let the words hang in the air like a framed truth. She had mocked a lifetime of sacrifice with a laugh. And now, for the first time, I didn't apologize for protecting the pieces she tried to throw away. The day after I told Maya I canceled the transfer, I waited for the storm. I expected rage, guilt-tripping, maybe even Carter calling to clear the air. But what I got was silence. No texts, no calls. Just a quiet that stretched over days like a blanket pulled too tight. And oddly, I didn't mind it. I cleaned my house, not the usual dusting and vacuuming, but a real, deep clean. I opened every drawer, every cabinet, and asked myself, do I need this? Does this serve me anymore? When I got to the cedar chest at the foot of my bed, I found Maya's old baby clothes. I ran my fingers over a tiny cardigan I once knitted during a snowstorm when she had the flu. Her childhood scent, lavender, milk, and dreams, still clung to it. I didn't cry. I folded it carefully and put it back, but this time not out of obligation, out of reverence. There's a difference. That same afternoon, I sat down and wrote Maya a letter, not to beg or berate, just to speak plainly. She may never read it, but writing it was a balm. Dear Maya, there is a difference between disappointment and regret. I'm disappointed in how you treated something sacred, but I don't regret loving you. I gave you what I could, every step of the way. I gave you my time, my energy, my husband's memory, and nearly the last of my savings. But when you laughed at that album, you weren't just laughing at old pictures. You were laughing at my life's work. That album sat atop something heavier than a mortgage check. It sat atop 30 years of motherhood. I didn't cancel the transfer to punish you. I canceled it because I realized giving you that money meant giving away the last thread of self-respect I had left. And I couldn't do that. Not anymore. Maybe one day you'll understand. Love, Mom, I didn't mail it. I slipped it between the pages of my album, right next to the picture of her asleep in my lap at 2 years old. It felt right there. A few days. Later, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Maya standing there, arms crossed, face pale. You really did it, she said. No hello, no apology, just disbelief laced with anger. I did, I replied. You said it was a gift. So was that album. You didn't seem to care much for it either. She looked away, her jaw tight. We're in a bind now. Carter's, furious. The lender backed out because we don't have the full amount anymore. I nodded. I'm sorry for that, but not sorry I made the choice I did. She stepped inside without asking, walked straight to the kitchen and sat down at the table she'd once colored on as a child. You know, I didn't mean it like that, she said, softer now. The album thing, it just caught me off guard. I sat across from her. You called it a relic. It was a joke. I took a breath. Jokes don't land like that unless they're rooted in truth. We sat in silence. She looked tired. Her perfect hair pulled back, her expensive nails chipped at the edges. For the first time in years, she looked young to me again, not polished, not composed, just lost. So what now? She asked. Are we done? No, I said gently. We're not done, but the rules have changed. I won't buy love. I won't fund disrespect. She blinked, her eyes glassy, but not crying. I didn't think it mattered to you that much. That stung, but not as much as it would have a week ago. That's the saddest part, Maya. It mattered to me more than anything. I got up, walked over to the cupboard, and pulled out 2 teacups. Set them down. Poured us each some Earl Grey. She took a sip quietly. Then stood. I'll figure it out, she said. I know you will. And then she left. That night, I sat alone again. But I didn't feel hollow. I wasn't waiting for a call. I wasn't bracing for another insult, dressed as humor. I was simply still. I lit a candle. Put on one of James's old jazz records. Let the music fill the rooms that had held so much silence. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened the guest bedroom closet and pulled out a suitcase. Not for her, for me. I booked a weekend trip up to the Berkshires. Just me, a bed and breakfast, and a promise to rediscover who Ellen Cartwright was before she became just someone's mother. For decades, I had made Maya the center of my life. Now I was ready to take a supporting role in hers and finally play the lead in mine. She came to me expecting guilt. Instead, she met a woman who had nothing left to prove and everything still left to reclaim. 2 weeks passed. The silence between us held firm, less like a wall, more like a glass barrier. I could see Maya clearly now, and maybe for the first time, not just as my daughter, but as a woman who had never truly learned to see anyone but herself. I didn't call her, and she didn't call me. Then one morning, while folding laundry, my phone buzzed with a new email. The subject line read, "Hope you're sleeping well while we're losing everything." It was from Maya. I hesitated before opening it. Part of me still hoped it would contain a flicker of humility, a line of remorse. Instead, it was a letter soaked in blame. "Mom, I can't believe you'd sabotage us like this. Do you know what it's like trying to scramble for financing 2 weeks before closing? Carter's furious. The lender says we're too risky without that cushion, and we might lose the townhouse. He started talking like it's my fault. You told me this money was a gift from you and Dad, and now you've made us look irresponsible. It's humiliating. I've always appreciated what you did for me, even if I didn't show it the way you wanted. But this feels petty and passive-aggressive. I thought you were better than this. You've made your point. Are you happy now?" I reread it twice. Not a single line that said, "I'm sorry." Not a breath of curiosity about why I changed my mind. Just shame disguised as righteousness. And I felt it, that old urge. The maternal reflex to fix it, to reach for the phone and say, "Come over, let's talk." To sacrifice myself at the altar of her comfort. But I didn't move. Instead, I clicked archive, not delete. I wasn't erasing it. I was simply choosing not to carry it. That night, I lit a fire in the hearth and pulled out one of my journals. It was a leather-bound one James had given me our first Christmas. I'd filled most of it with stories about Maya when she was little. I turned to a blank page and wrote, "Let her stumble, let her fall. It's the only way she'll learn to stand." Meanwhile, life was unraveling for her in a way I could feel in the small updates I received through our town's grapevine. Neighbors, old friends, the occasional social media post I couldn't help but peek at. Carter had postponed the wedding. Officially, they were still engaged, but someone mentioned he'd taken a solo trip to Miami to clear his head, and Maya had posted a selfie with a caption that read, "Hard resets aren't always a choice, but sometimes they're a gift in disguise." That was the most self-aware thing I'd seen from her in months, maybe years. Still, the consequences kept snowballing. They lost the townhouse. Another couple swooped in with a cash offer. Maya and Carter were forced to rent a temporary unit, an overpriced one-bedroom on the edge of town, far from the glossy neighborhood she used to brag about. Her Instagram stories, once filled with latte art and real estate buzzwords, became noticeably sparse. No more filtered brunches, no more future homeowner hashtags. I wish I could say I felt vindicated. But the truth was more complicated. I felt relieved, because I finally saw that she was capable of struggle, of consequence. And as painful as it was to watch, it also felt necessary. One night, I got a call from Lydia, a mutual friend of Maya's from childhood. She ran into Maya at a grocery store and said she looked rattled, wearing sweats and no makeup, pushing a half-empty cart. She didn't even say hi, Lydia told me. Just kept her head down. I think she's going through it. I nodded. Maybe it's time she did. There was no malice in my voice, just reality. Sometimes the only thing standing between a child and their maturity is a parent's unwillingness to get out of the way. And for years, I'd stood firmly in front of every failure, every hardship, blocking them like a mother shields her toddler from a hot stove. But this time, I had let the heat touch her, and she was learning. Later that week, I found something unexpected in the mailbox. A small envelope with Maya's handwriting. No return. Address, inside was a card. No glitter, no cartoon characters, no forced sentiment, just a single sentence. "I don't know how to fix everything, but I'm starting to understand what I broke." I stared at that line for a long time, not a full apology, not even close. But something was shifting. She wasn't asking for the money back. She wasn't blaming. She wasn't posturing. She was reflecting, and that felt like a beginning. The house was gone. The fiancé was slipping. And now, for the first time, my daughter was standing in the ruins, finally able to see the foundation she never thought she needed to understand. 2 weeks after the card arrived, Maya showed up at my door again, this time without calling ahead. I was pruning the rose bushes when I heard her car pull up. I didn't look right away. I wanted to give her the dignity of arriving without an audience. When I finally turned, she was already halfway up the walkway, arms crossed, not in anger, but like she was holding herself together. She looked thinner, tired. Her usual polish was gone. No makeup, no heels, no designer tote bag slung over her shoulder. Just Maya, in jeans and a hoodie, eyes rimmed with something close to humility. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey," I echoed, setting down my gardening gloves. We stood there in silence for a moment. Then I stepped aside and gestured to the porch. "Chairs." She nodded and sat. "I'm not here to argue," she said. "That's good," I replied. "I don't have the energy for another courtroom session." A weak smile tugged at her mouth. Then she sighed. "Things with Carter are not great." I waited. "He's been distant since the house fell through. Keeps saying I made him look stupid for relying on the money. We've postponed the wedding indefinitely." I studied her carefully. She wasn't fishing for pity. She was unraveling at her own pace. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. "Yeah," she muttered. "Me too." Another pause. "Mom," she began, her voice cracking slightly. "I know I was awful at the party. And before that, probably longer than I even realize. I didn't interrupt. It's just, I got so used to pushing forward, achieving, performing. I didn't stop to think about what I was standing on. Who built it for me?" I looked at her, really looked at her. And in that moment, I didn't see the girl who mocked my gift or the woman who blamed me when things fell apart. I saw my daughter, stripped bare, finally vulnerable. "That album wasn't just photos," she whispered. "It was everything you did for me, and I acted like it was trash." A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it quickly, but not before. "I saw it. I don't know if I can fix it," she added, "but I want to try." I leaned back in my chair, heart aching but steady. I didn't rush to embrace her. I didn't fill the silence with comfort. I simply let the truth hang there between us, like the laundry I'd forgotten to take in. "Do you know what I thought about the night of your party?" I finally said. She shook her head. "I thought about the time you had the flu in 2nd grade. I was up all night cooling your forehead and spooning ice chips between your lips. You were burning up and whimpering, 'Don't leave me, Mommy.'" Her lip trembled. "I never did," I said. "Not once. Through every broken heart, every slammed door, every silence. I never left. But now I know that staying doesn't always mean loving. Sometimes it just means enabling." She swallowed. "I didn't mean to take you for granted." "But you did," I said gently. "And I allowed it. That's on both of us." We sat there until the sun started to shift, casting long shadows on the porch. Then Maya reached into her bag and pulled something out. The photo album, the same one she'd laughed at, the same one that had been pushed aside like old junk. It looked different now, well thumbed, the edges slightly frayed, the ribbon creased from being retied. "I've been reading it," she said. "One page every night. It's like meeting a version of you I never bothered to know." I blinked back tears. "Thank you for not giving me the money," she added. "That caught me off guard." "Why?" I asked. "Because if you had, I never would have had to look in the mirror. I'd still be living in that illusion, thinking I deserved everything just because I was your daughter." She stood up and handed me the album. "I was going to return this," she said. "But I think I need to finish it first, I nodded. Take your time. As she turned to go, I said one more thing. Maya, love isn't just what we give. It's what we protect. Sometimes from others, sometimes from ourselves. She nodded slowly. I'm learning, she said. Good, I whispered, because that's all I ever really wanted, for her to learn, not through lectures or money, but through the beautiful, painful work of becoming a whole person. As her car pulled away, I sat on the porch, with the evening breeze dancing around me, the scent of roses and fresh soil in the air, and for the first time in years, I felt the ache of motherhood begin to soften. She had come to reclaim money, but left with something more precious, the truth about who I was, and what love really costs when it's finally understood. Spring came early that year. The daffodils bloomed 2 weeks ahead of schedule. The robins returned like clockwork, and for the first time in decades, I didn't feel like I was waiting for anything. Not a phone call, not an apology, not approval, just peace. I never sent Maya away, but I also didn't chase her back. We stayed in cautious orbit for a while, check-in texts about the weather or a new book, occasional photos of a home-cooked meal she was proud of. No heavy conversations. Just small, steady steps. Meanwhile, I started something I'd long put off. I opened a scholarship fund in James's name at the community college where he once took night classes before Maya was born. I used part of the insurance money, the same down payment Maya never received. It felt like divine redirection, something real, something that would outlive both of us. I named it the Cartwright Perseverance Award and made the first donation myself, $20,000. The first recipient was a young woman named Marissa, a single mother working toward a degree in early childhood education. The day I met her, she cried and hugged me like I was her own mother. No one's ever believed in me like this, she said, and just like that, I knew the money had gone exactly where it was supposed to. The rest of the funds? I divided them into 2 parts, one for my retirement cushion and one for traveling. I'd spent decades tethered to duty, to motherhood, to waiting on someone else's needs. Now I was untethering. I signed up for a journaling workshop at the SEO Senior Center and started teaching free English classes on Wednesdays. I bought a train ticket to Maine and spent a weekend in a bed and breakfast by the sea, where I ate fresh oysters and laughed with strangers who didn't care how old I was, only how present. And I began writing my own story again, not as a footnote in Maya's life, but as the author of my own. Then, on a bright April afternoon, Maya stopped by. No warning this time, but it didn't feel like an ambush. She came alone, holding something in her hands, a small frame. Inside was a photo from the album, one of my favorites. The 2 of us in the kitchen, covered in flour, baking a birthday cake she'd insisted on helping with at age 8. We're both laughing, genuine, messy joy. I kept it by my bed, she said. Helps me remember who we were before everything got complicated. I smiled. We were never perfect, I said. But we were always real. She looked around the living room, saw the fresh coat of paint, the journal on the coffee table, the new photo of me standing next to Marissa at the scholarship award ceremony. You're happy, she said, not with envy, but wonder. I am, I replied, because I stopped waiting for someone to hand it to me. I built it myself. She nodded slowly. I've been thinking about that money, she said, about what it really meant. I stayed quiet. You weren't trying to control me. You were trying to wake me up. I tilted my head. Not at first. At first, I just wanted you to remember me, to see me. But later, yes, I realized that withholding wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. She set the frame on the mantel. I think I'm ready to figure things out on my own now, she said. Not because I have to, because I want to. I believed her, because her voice had finally lost the tremble of entitlement. It held the weight of someone who had fallen hard and gotten up on her own. We had tea again that day. She didn't stay long. She didn't need to. Healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just two people sitting at the same table again, no longer trying to change each other, just sharing space. As she left, she hugged me, really hugged me. No performance, no distance, just warmth. Before she got in the car, she turned back. "Thank you for not giving me everything," she said. I smiled. "That's the most everything I could have given you." She drove off, and I went back inside, stood in front of the fireplace, and touched the photo frame she'd left behind. And for the first time, I felt the story was no longer stuck in the middle. We weren't healed completely, but we were healing. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved for your own peace? Was it the hardest thing you ever did, or the bravest? Share your strength in the comments below. You never know who might need it. Later that week, I hosted a small dinner with my women's journaling group. Just 6 of us around the table, swapping stories over homemade soup and wine. Someone asked if I had children, and I nodded. "One daughter," I said. "We're learning how to love each other again, this time with eyes wide open." There were murmurs of understanding. Everyone at that table had a story of someone they loved too hard, too long, too quietly. And when I cleared the table that night, I paused before rinsing the dishes, just to breathe in the moment. Quiet, full, whole. She hadn't needed my money. She needed my boundaries. And by giving her that, I finally gave us both the chance to become something stronger than mother and daughter. We became women rebuilding respect, brick by brick. There's something no one tells you about motherhood. If you do it well enough, you eventually become invisible. In the early years, you're everything. They cling to you, call for you, depend on you, like the earth depends on the sun. But as they grow, they start to look outward, to the world, to themselves, and little by little, you fade from the center to the sidelines, still cheering, still loving, but often unseen. I used to think disappearing was the price of being a good mother, but now I see it differently. You don't need to disappear to prove your love. You don't need to give until you're empty to be worthy. You don't need to be everything all the time, forever. Sometimes the most radical act of love is stepping back and letting them see who you are without the costume of sacrifice. These past few months have changed me in ways I couldn't have imagined. I didn't just reclaim my savings. I reclaimed my self-worth, my voice, my story. I realized that the album Maya mocked was never meant to impress a room full of strangers. It was never about the aesthetics. It was about legacy, memory, truth. And truth doesn't need to be flashy. It just needs to be honored. I still think about that night at the party, not because I'm stuck there, but because it was a mirror I finally chose to look into. In that moment of humiliation, I discovered the quiet resolve to say, enough, enough disrespect, enough invisibility. Enough sacrificing my needs on the altar of someone else's convenience. And the beauty is, once you draw that line, something incredible happens. The people who truly love you learn to meet you where you are. And the people who don't, they fade away, making space for peace. I don't know what lies ahead for me and Maya. Healing is a process. We're not going back to what we were. We're building something new. Something slower, wiser, mutual. She still has growing to do. So do I. But we've both begun. Sometimes people assume that parenting ends when your child turns 18. That the job is done once they move out, buy a house, start a family of their own. But that's a lie. Parenting doesn't end. It evolves. At some point, it stops being about protecting them from pain and starts being about letting them understand. I used to think giving Maya everything would make her feel secure. But what I really did, over the years, was rob her of the lessons that come with hardship. She needed to feel what it meant to fall short, to struggle, to work through the discomfort without a safety net made of my savings and silence. And I needed to feel what it meant to say no and survive the guilt, because that guilt, it's heavy. But it's also laced with liberation. I no longer confuse my worth with my usefulness. I no longer measure my love in dollars or dinners or dropped everything. I measure it now in boundaries, in truth, in the quiet strength it takes to be seen, not as a provider, but as a person. Not long ago, I started writing again, not just journals or letters, but real stories. I joined a writing circle for older women, and once a month we gather in a cozy room with tea and trembling voices, and we read what we've written. My first story was titled, "The Album on the Table." I didn't say it was about my daughter. I didn't need to. By the time I finished reading it, 3 women were crying. One came up and hugged me afterward and said, "You just gave words to something I've felt my whole life." And that, more than anything, reminded me. Stories matter. Our stories. Not just the polished ones we show the world, but the ones tucked inside old photo albums, wrapped in silence and sacrifice. So here's mine, told now, out loud, with no apology. I was a mother who gave too much. I was a woman who forgot herself. And then one day, I remembered, I took back a down payment. I took back a photo album. I took back my name. And I didn't do it with fury, I did it with grace. Because dignity, once reclaimed, becomes a lighthouse for everything you build after. Every woman watching this, who's ever been mocked, dismissed, or taken for granted, you are not a relic. You are not a joke. You are the keeper of history, and you matter. You always have. You always will.